Hi, and welcome to part 2 of this little series on James. We're going to be in James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. So if you want to grab a Bible and read along, I'll read the verses. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. So James is talking about wisdom. How do you get it? How God gives it. And wisdom is a common theme in the Bible. We have a collection of books that we often refer to as wisdom literature. It's a common theme repeated over and over in the Bible. What is wisdom? There's some synonyms that the Bible uses for wisdom. It could use understanding or insight as well when you see those words. But it's distinguished from words like knowledge or expertise because wisdom in the Bible is paired with godly character. It's not enough just to have the knowledge, the know-how. You have to actually serve God. You have to get that knowledge, you have to get that wisdom from God, and you have to serve Him. The Bible often refers to wisdom as actually fear of God. So if there's no fear of God in anybody's wisdom or expertise, it's not biblical wisdom. And the Bible very often uses two paths. There's the path of the fool and there's the path of the wise. There's the path of the wicked and there's the path of the righteous. As we see in this passage in James, again, you see two different paths that we can take, whether we have wisdom or not. And when James describes God and how God gives wisdom, he describes God that he gives generously without reproach. That means that God gives and there's no regrets in his giving. The language means that there's a singularness in God's desire to give us wisdom. It's not as though he's a parent who gives a gift to their child and then immediately tells the child how much it costs them and that they regret giving it. No, God gives and there's absolutely no regret in the giving of the gift. Unlike us, see, we doubt. We're double-minded, we're tossed about. That's the contrast. But it's telling us how we have to ask in faith and not be double-minded. In a sense, it's telling us to be a little bit more like God in our singular focus. For us, it's our devotion to Him, not having anything crowding our desires and goals. This pairs well with Matthew 7, where Jesus says, ask God and ask and you will receive. There's this common theme in the Bible that if we would just ask, God would give us. And I think about that for myself. How many times have I been fearful but wasn't prayerful, wasn't asking God for things? I might be complaining to God, but I've actually asked. Did I ask one time to make this situation better? Did I pray once for our country, for my health, for the well-being of my loved ones? I challenge you, every time you complain, think about how many times you haven't asked. It's surprising to me how often we don't do it, and it's just so simple. James is giving us a challenge to be single-minded in our love of God and our desire for wisdom that isn't crowded by our other desires. And I think in a time like this, we're challenged to think through what are some of the competing interests. And it's not that all these interests are bad. There can be good things like health, our relationships, our job, our income. But we start to realize the idolatry when we look at the fears in our life. We think about the things that could be taken and we start to fear. Again, some of those things are good. It would be good for us to have an interest in keeping our family safe, keeping our financial needs met. There's something that's good about that. But when we start to have this sort of ultimate sense that, how could we serve God without that? How can we exist without that thing? That's where we start to realize the idolatry in our heart, where it's fine to have God at the top with these other interests, but is God in the back seat and that other thing is in the front? That's where we start to think where we're actually double-minded. We ask God for something, but we don't have actually an interest in doing those things if that one thing gets changed. You know what I mean? And sometimes I pray to God and I expect He's going to make my situation better, but maybe I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but I'm not really going to forgive that person. I'm not really going to be less selfish in my life. God, you're going to fix my situation. You're going to give me wisdom that only you can give. James would say that if that kind of asking, you're really a liar, you're double-minded, and you're tossed to and fro. This idea of being stable is a consistent theme in Scripture as well. In Psalm 1, the blessed man, he's like a tree. He's planted by streams. His leaf doesn't wither. He yields its fruit. Even when the weather is changing, that tree is still there. Unlike the wicked, they're just blown around when the wind comes through, like chaff, as the psalm says. Or in Ephesians 4, which describes us being no longer like children tossed and fro. So there's a kind of maturity that wisdom brings us where we're stable and we're unshaken. We build our house on the solid ground and not the sand. It's a repeated theme in Scripture. And I think it's something that I want, to be able to live through rocky times and to not lose trust in God. Because when we start to lose trust in God in unstable times like this, it starts to show us where our true allegiance were. Were we trusting in God, or were we just trusting that if I go to church, if I live a good life, God's going to bless me, I'm going to have this nice family, this nice house, this nice job. But when some of those things start to get a little interrupted by God's plan, and again, the situation that we're in right now, let me emphasize, this was God's plan. I don't know why he's doing it, but it's not a shock to him. So it's a time to really sit and think about, how is God revealing my own double-mindedness, and what are the fears that I have, and do I really want wisdom? Because it might be costly. It might change things about myself. I might start doing things that right now seem uncomfortable, might compete with some of my interests. So as we think about what wisdom is like, the wisdom that our country needs, the wisdom that you and I need, I pray that you would consider what this passage would say and how we ask God. So I encourage you to do that. Ask God for wisdom, that he would give you a kind of wisdom that would help you to be unstable in your life. It's what we need in our country right now. Christians who are stable with the wisdom from above.